Part 155. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1541. The prince looked at the summer tea that she handed over and remained silent. Eunuch Wu reacted and immediately stepped forward to take it. Man Bao also looked up and down the prince, took out a medicine bag from the medicine box and handed it to Eunuch Wu, and said with a smile, "This is a mosquito-proof medicine bag, the father-in-law can put it in the purse for the prince to wear, don't worry, it can be worn even close to the princess, and it is very useful." Eunuch Wu also hesitated for a moment before reaching out to take it. The gifts were all sent out, Man Bao was satisfied, and smiled while carrying the medicine box. "Then I will go to Daming Palace to see the crown princess first." The prince raised his eyebrows slightly, looked at her and asked, "Are you leaving now?" Man Bao nodded and turned to ask the prince, "Do you want me to take your pulse?" The prince put down the pen, rolled up his sleeves and stretched out his hand. "Come on." Man Bao stepped forward to feel his pulse, and then affirmed, "His Royal Highness is doing well, but today may be too tired, pay more attention to rest, it would be better to go to bed earlier at night." Seeing that Man Bao had read the pulse and still didn't ask for it, he even brought the medicine box and wanted to leave, so he looked at Eunuch Wu. Upon receiving the prince's wink, Eunuch Wu immediately put away the 2 packets of medicine, and sent Man Bao out with a smile. He sent people all the way out of Zanshifu and on the corridor, "Master Zhou Xiao, this place is far from Xing'anmen. You are going to Daming Palace, why did you come here?" Man Bao said, "I will go out from the imperial city today and enter through the main entrance." Seeing that she didn't understand, Eunuch Wu looked around, and after confirming that no one was there, he asked in a low voice, "Dr. Zhou, if you have anything to say to His Highness, you and His Highness have a good relationship. Is your Highness will be stingy to help?" Man Bao reacted and immediately shook his head and said, "I don't need His Highness's help. I gave the medicine package to His Royal Highness sincerely." Eunuch Wu also had some doubts, mainly because Man Bao was never someone who was always courteous. He hesitated for a moment, and simply asked, "Did something happen to you when you left the palace in a hurry yesterday?" Man Bao, "It's okay, just go to the Ministry of Household to enter the file and get the salary." Really, Eunuch Wu didn't understand why he was in a hurry, so he sprinted in the East Palace. It doesn't matter whether Duke Wu believes it or not, it's the truth anyway. Man Bao also knew that her behavior today made the prince and Eunuch Wu think a lot, and couldn't help sighing, "I really care about the prince sincerely." Eunuch Wu just watched Man Bao leave sadly. Eunuch Wu thought for a while, and began to doubt himself. Did he misunderstand Dr. Zhou Xiao? In fact, Mrs. Zhou Xiaoda is still very good. But that medicine bag, giving it to him, or even to others, is like her usual time, but to the prince. How to think, how strange. Although Zhou Man's performance is not very obvious, and he is very close to the prince and princess on weekdays, everyone thinks that she will give things to the prince, the servants and maids in the palace, but she will not give things to the prince, and emperor. As for why, everyone hasn't figured it out yet, it's just such an understanding anyway. Eunuch Wu did not complete the task given by the prince, so he could only go back to the public house carefully, and whispered to the prince, "Dr. Zhou Xiao said she was worried about your heat stroke and sincerely cared about you, that's why she gave you something special." The prince asked, "Did the prince concubine give her a heavy gift yesterday?" Eunuch Wu shook his head and whispered, "I've never heard of it." "That is no more." The prince glanced at the medicine bag that Eunuch Wu had put away, waved his hand and said, "Forget it, she won't say it now, she will always say it in the future, you can use the things first." "Yes." And Man Bao, who had already boarded the carriage in the palace and left the palace, was asking the driver to slow down and pass by the warehouse of the household. It would take a long journey, but the maid who drove her this time happened to be the 4th father-in-law, who had brought Man Bao to the East Palace to see the crown prince. After Manbao overturned the car last time, he was a blessing in disguise. Although he lay on the bed for a long time, because Manbao went to see his injuries every now and then, and even gave him bone setting and medicine, Eunuch Wu simply took him to the East Palace as a postman. Did not throw him to the epidemic prevention station to fend for himself. After he was healed, he stayed in the East Palace. Although he was also doing errands, his grade was improved by 1 level, and his life was much better than before. So Manbao said that he wanted to walk around to the warehouse of the Ministry of Housing, and he turned around. Anyway, Master Zhou Xiao came out early today. If he goes a little faster, he will never be late. Far away, when there was still some distance from the household warehouse, Manbao lifted the curtain and lay down at the car window to look forward. I saw a lot of people pulling the station and queuing up there, and some officials were calling their names loudly. General Counsel Zhang Zhenda's family came forward, Chongquen Museum editor and Imperial Dr. Zhou Man's family came forward. At this moment, Zhou Man didn't need to instruct fourth eunuch Rong to know what to do. He slowly stopped the carriage and let Manbao look at it from a distance. He lowered his voice and said to Manbao, "Lord Zhou Xiao, we can't come forward. If the palace knows that we have private opinions with outsiders, we will be charged with guilt. Even if the guilt is not serious, it is not good to be punished." Manbao nodded again and again, "I know, so I watched from a distance." Manbao leaned over the window and looked over there. There were a lot of people coming and going, and there were a lot of stopped carriages, so the carriages of Manbao and the others were not noticeable at all. However, some people saw that Rong Si was a servant, and they would still look at the carriage curiously. Wu Wulang, who was standing in front of the door, didn't know that Manbao was watching from a distance, and immediately brought Zhou Lejun and Zhou Liwei in after hearing the announcement. After all, it was the first time in his life that he had received a salary from the palace, and Wu Wulang was still a little timid, so he also encouraged Zhou Liwei. When the three entered, the clerk of the Ministry of Household checked the posts on both sides and the seal on it, and then gave them a note, confirming again, the 5th grade editor and the 6th grade imperial doctor. Before they came, MRS Liu and MRS Zheng explained to them that as long as it was confirmed that Manbao's official grade was correct, it should be, so the three nodded together. The clerk raised his head and glanced at them. Seeing that there was another girl there, he glanced at her curiously, but no one said that a girl in the official's family was not allowed to receive the salary. In the capital, there are all kinds of situations in the back residences of officials. Some are the servants of the stewards to receive the salary, some are the wives and children, and of course, there are also daughters. Anyway, as long as the post and seal are correct, and it is indeed the official's family. The clerk asked while taking notes, "Who are you all from Zhou Man?" Wu Wulang immediately said, "I am Zhou Man's 5th brother, this is Zhou Man's nephew and niece." He emphasized, "It's all pro." "Clerk, I didn't say you were fake." He turned over their books, confirmed their identities, and stamped the note on the note, saying, "Okay, take the note and go to the side to get your salary. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow is May 1st, May 1st Labor Day, everyone's labor is the most glorious, happy Labor Day. I hope the epidemic will end soon, you can go out and play." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1542. Wu Wulang glanced at it and immediately handed it over to Zhou Lejun. Zhou Lejun saw that the stipend, lumi, and silk cloth they could receive were written in detail on the note. The clerk said, "Your family is lucky, this month just happens to release the summer silk cloth, and June is the deadline for the assignment of the job field, so your family should be able to get the job field this year, and you can receive the job field next year. Rent." Wu Wulang and the others didn't quite understand what the job field was, but in order not to show their timidity, they didn't ask anything, and decided to go back and ask MRS Liu and Mr. Zhuang. They are well informed, they must know. After confirming the note, Zhou Lejun took the note and the fifth uncle to the side, and when they were far away, she lowered her voice and said, "Fifth uncle, there are a total of 23 Shilumi, can we fit in our car?" Wu Lang's eyes lit up and asked, "There are so many." Zhou Lejun nodded again and asked, "Can you hold it?" Wu Wulang murmured with Zhou Liwei, and then said, "It should be possible, it's a good chance that we brought a mule cart, 23 stones, he can pack up to 30 bags, Liwei and I will pack some outside, we will definitely be able to squeeze on. Mules have more stamina than horses or mules." The three took the slips to collect the salary and lumi. The Ministry of Household did not like to settle accounts with silver, and they were all issued with copper coins. It happened that her two official grades added up to 6,000 coins. The official in charge of distributing the salary gave them the 6 hanging coins, asked them to sign, and put it on the salary of the note. Draw a circle to indicate that they have taken it. In the warehouse next to it, rice is produced, and the servants of the household department took out bags of rice from the warehouse, weighed them, put them aside, and kept calculating 23 shi for them. Zhou Lejun kept staring at how the other house next to him received lumi. Seeing that the servants had weighed lumi, he stepped aside and stepped forward, shoved a handful of copper plates into their hands, and asked them to help move lumi to the mule. In the car, the servants smiled and started to help. When Wu Lang saw it, he was about to say that he and Li Wei were fine, but Li Wei pulled Wu Lang and asked Uncle Wu to listen to Lejun. Wu Lang paused for a while, then pulled Zhou Liwei out to help, in fact, to rearrange the food so that he could fit everything. They didn't expect that there were so many lumi, and they had to pull 2 cars again next month. On the carriage, Man Bao saw that her fifth brother led the servants to carry lumi out. He was satisfied, and smiled with the fourth father of Rong, "Let's go." Fourth eunuch Rong responded with a smile and turned his horse's head to leave. Because they were delayed on the road for a while, eunuch Rong deliberately accelerated the speed of the horse, and after a few squares out of the imperial city, they arrived at the main gate of Daming Palace. When Man Bao was hurriedly rushing to the crown princess residence with the medicine box on her back, the palace maid beside the crown princess stopped her on the road and said respectfully, "Master Zhou Xiao, the crown princess is with Princess Mingda and Princess Changjiao, you go straight to the place. Just go there." After speaking, he led her to the residence of Princess Mingda and the others. Man Bao exhaled and went to the side hall with her. As soon as he entered the room, a gust of cool air came over the surface. Because the heat from the sun dissipated a lot, Man Bao let out a sigh of relief and said, "It's better for you to be cooler here, what are you talking about?" The crown princess smiled and said, "Tell me about the rouge you and Mingda Changjiao made." She stared at Man Bao expectantly and asked, "Man Bao, can I use that rouge?" After thinking about it, Man Bao nodded, "I don't have any medicinal herbs for activating blood, it's alright, but Niang, what are you using that?" Mingda couldn't help but said, "Everyone wants a good color, what do you say you use it for?" The princess bowed her head a little embarrassedly. Man Bao looked at Mingda's face, and then at the face of the crown princess. After a while, he nodded and said, "Use it, just use less." The princess immediately asked, "Why use less? Is it bad for the fetus?" "No," Man Bao said, "it may cause acne on your face if you use it too much." She paused and said, "But I'm not afraid of acne. We'll make acne cream this time." Crown Princess, "That's fine, she should use less." Mingda and Changyu on the side couldn't help covering their mouths and laughing. Man Bao felt the pulse for the princess, saying that everything was normal, and then went to make ointment with Mingda and the others. After all, it is medicine, and the smell is very strong. The crown princess glanced at it from a distance, and she did not dare to come too close, so she could only walk away regretfully. But before she left, she told the 3 of them that if they were done, they must keep a share for her. While pounding the medicinal materials, Man Bao stared at the maids making the medicinal liquid, and asked Mingda curiously, "Do women really like these ointments so much?" Minda nodded. Chang Yu touched his face and asked in more detail, "If something can make you more beautiful and younger, would you like it?" After thinking about it, Man Bao shook his head, "I'm very young now, but if there is one thing that can make me smarter and can understand it at a glance, then I will definitely try my best to get it." "Chang Yu, I say pretty, you say smart?" Mingda said with a smile, "The same reason, it's the same thing that I like very much and want to get." Man Bao nodded thoughtfully. After completing today's steps and instructing some things, Man Bao was leaving. Before leaving, she asked the palace maid, "I don't know if your majesty is busy, but are you free to see me?" The palace maid was stunned for a moment and then asked, "Does Zhou Xiao have something to meet with his majesty?" After thinking about it, Man Bao nodded. There was indeed something wrong. After all, he had to apologize to someone. So the palace maid went out, and came over after a while and said, "Your majesty is in the main hall. There is no one at the moment, so please come with your servant." After sending Man Bao to the main hall, Gu Zhong's little apprentice waited and walked forward with a smile to lead Man Bao into the hall. The emperor had just discussed matters with his ministers. Because of the heat in the afternoon, he was sitting and eating melons. However, this time he learned to be smart, and he didn't dare to eat more, just one at a time. When he saw Man Bao coming in, he lifted his eyelids and glanced at her, waiting for her to salute before asking, "What's going on?" Man Bao glanced at the melon he was eating, and stared at his face for a long time, staring at the emperor's heart. He couldn't help putting down the melon in his hand, sat up slightly, and asked, "Why, I'm sick." Man Bao hesitated for a moment and then said, "Your majesty seems to be suffering from a cold." "Emperor, I just ate one." Man Bao was silent for a while, and the emperor followed suit, and finally rolled up his sleeves and stretched out his hand. Gu Zhong was frightened when he saw it, and immediately stepped forward to move the small stool and the table, and let Man Bao see the emperor. Man Bao opened the medicine box, took out the pulse pillow from inside, put the emperor's hand on the pulse pillow, and said seriously, "Your Majesty, you have to believe me, I came here today not to see you sick, but to give you brought something." The emperor asked angrily, "What do you want to send me?" Medicine bag. Seeing the emperor's face stern, Man Bao immediately explained, "It's a medicine bag for relieving heat and mosquitoes. I made it myself, and I also paid for the medicine from the Imperial Hospital, which is very useful. Man Bao entered the second place on the monthly ticket list last month. Thank you for your support, I am happy. Today is May 1st, Labor Day. I wish everyone a happy Labor Day." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1543. It's really rare that you are so generous. The emperor saw that her pulse was not very good, so he motioned her to be more serious, and after a while, seeing her still staring at him, he asked, "Tell me, where do you have any disease?" Man Bao said solemnly, "It's just the cold." The emperor said again, "I just ate one." "No, I haven't finished eating one, so I ate half of it." Man Bao reached out and touched the melon on the table next to him, and it was cold. Man Bao frowned and asked, "Is the ice over?" Gu Zhong immediately said, "It's been hot these 2 days, and your majesty has been suffering in the summer, so the melons and fruits have been frozen in the ice basin." Man Bao looked at the 2 ice basins under the desk, and realized that the room was indeed much cooler than the outside, but it was already evening, and she came all the way down the corridor of the side hall, and it wasn't very hot, so not much feeling. Man Bao stared at the 2 basins of ice that were about to turn into water and asked, Are there only 2 basins of ice in the hall? Gu Zhong glanced at the emperor, and then whispered, there were still 2 pots before. I don't know why, but under Zhou Man's eyes, Gu Zhong felt a little guilty. He explained, there were many adults in the hall before, and it was hot, so I added 2 more basins of ice. Man Bao said with certainty, has your majesty ever left the hall? Gu Zhong was still the answer, we went out with Master Lu and Master Li in the future and came back in less than 3/4 of an hour. Man Bao asked the emperor, did you feel very cool when you came in? Emperor. He looked at Man Bao seriously, made sure that she was not mocking him, but asking, and nodded. Isn't it cool to enter the hall with ice basin on a hot day? Man Bao said, the cold and heat alternate, you are suffering from cold, your majesty, I will remove some cold for you, and then prescribe some medicine. The emperor felt refreshed at this moment, his body was stronger, and there was no pain in his stomach, so he didn't want to take medicine at all. But the needle is really comfortable. Although the needle looks at the old man, as long as you don't look at it, you won't feel pain when you are pierced. Instead, you will feel sore and swollen. So he hesitated and nodded. Man Bao said, it's too cool in this room, let's go to the side hall. Man Bao gave the emperor a needle, and then gave him a prescription, take a pill now, and take another pill at night before going to bed. The emperor put on his clothes and looked at her curiously while putting on his shoes, are you really here to deliver medicine bags to me? Man Bao nodded again and again, it's true, why don't you guys believe me? She thought about it for a while, and said to the emperor with a sincere face, your majesty, I came here to thank you, and I'm sorry about what happened last time, but that's the rule, and if you give you a prescription, you'll be accepted. I didn't expect Lord Wei to scold you for this. The emperor immediately asked, do you also think Wei Ji is making trouble without reason? Man Bao hesitated for a moment, and didn't nod his head, but he didn't shake his head. But this was a great encouragement to the emperor, he simply dragged Man Bao to speak ill of Wei Ji. Wei Ji treats others with strictness and self-discipline, and in his eyes, I can't do anything at all. If I'm alone, I have to say that I eat more melons, and I'll guess that I'm looking for fun at night after taking a long nap during the nap, and I'm so peeking at my whereabouts and life, not to mention that I'm the emperor, even ordinary people can't bear it, right? Man Bao said, your majesty, you are not an ordinary person. She said, my husband said that if you want to do extraordinary things, you must be extraordinary people, if you want to achieve great achievements, you must suffer hardships that ordinary people can't bear. Man Bao said while collecting the medicine box, Master Wei is treating you as a holy monarch. Naturally, it is the holy monarch who asks you. You should be happy. The emperor felt that he should not be happy, but let alone, he was really happy. Man Bao handed the prescription to Gu Zhong, and whispered again, your majesty, this time I still have to be involved in the case. Emperor. Gu Zhong took the prescription and lowered his head even lower. After all, after receiving Zhou Man's rainbow fart, the emperor couldn't easily turn his face, so he waved her to get out. Man Bao ran away with the medicine box in his hand. After going back, I went to the Thai hospital to put this pulse on file. Xiao Yuanzheng has already seen it, after all, this is the second time, isn't it? He took a look at the emperor's pulse case and thought it was okay, but still planned to send Imperial Physician Lu for a follow-up the next day. He accepted the medical records and asked Man Bao, how is the medical book in your hand? Didn't you all pass the content? I have already started writing it, and it will take about 2 months to write. Because they are in the palace, although they look busy, they can squeeze out a lot of time, so their efficiency is still quite high. Xiao Yuanzheng nodded, seeing that she was about to leave, he couldn't help coughing lightly and stopped her and said, Lord Zhou Xiao, I have read the medical book you wrote to Dr. Lu, and I think some of it is convenient. Available, but I wanted to test a few of these stitches for myself. Man Bao nodded, try it, you can ask me if you don't understand. Seeing that she didn't understand what he meant, Xiao Yuanzhang said more clearly, I want to go to the side hall of the East Palace to see the needles of your 3 students. I heard that you haven't been to the side hall for the past 2 days. Man Baidao, the needles they have used recently are familiar. If there is any uncertainty, they will leave the disease for me, and let people send the medical record to me, so I didn't go there for 2 days. In fact, she and Mingda and the others were too forgetful about themselves. The 3 disciples in the side hall could learn by themselves, so she didn't bother with that. Xiao Yuanzhang said, I'll go take a look too. Man Bao smiled and said, go, you can help me keep an eye on my disciples by the way. If they don't understand something, you have to teach them. Xiao Yuan was nodding, but he always felt that something was weird. It was not until Man Bao left with the medicine box that he barely remembered. A disciple? Xiao Yuanzhang shook his head, sighed, and continued to stay on duty. Speaking of which, he was also relatively unlucky. Zhou Man encountered him on duty twice when he saw a doctor and was admitted to the emperor. Xiao Yuan was thinking that as long as Imperial Physician Lu came to work tomorrow morning, he would ask him to go to Daming Palace to see the emperor for a follow-up consultation, and then discuss with Imperial Physician Zheng about the shift, so that he would not be on duty at this time next time. He thought, he can always give Zhou Man a break, right? As a result, the next day Imperial Physician Lu hadn't even entered the palace, so a servant hurried over from Daming Palace and said, Xiao Yuanzhang, your majesty has summoned him. Xiao Yuan was awakened from the cot immediately, and quickly put on his shoes and asked, what's wrong with your majesty? Your majesty has a fever. Imperial Physician Lu and Imperial Physician Fang from Daming Palace have already gone. It's just that fever is a big deal, so Imperial Physician Lu asked you to come over. See you at 4 p.m. Alas, I'm a fallen person from the end of the world. I work overtime on other people's holidays. Today is still a day of extra work. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1544. Xiao Yuanzheng immediately turned around to get several bottles of medicine, and then hurried away with the servant. It was still dark at the moment, but the palace had already begun to operate. He knew that soon the emperor should get up and eat breakfast to prepare for the morning court. Obviously, the emperor was only found to have a fever in the early morning, and he didn't know whether it was just burning or it had been burning for a while. Which palace does your majesty rest in? The servant said in a low voice, in the middle palace. Xiao Yuanzhang breathed a sigh of relief, and accelerated a bit. The group trotted onto the boat, and after reaching Daming Palace, they trotted to the bedroom behind the main hall. In this era, it doesn't matter what the fever is because of the fever, anyway, fever is a big thing, so not only the Queen Mother who lives in another palace, but also the old man Tang who was on duty in front was disturbed. Xiao Yuan is hurriedly going to consult the emperor. The emperor only had a fever, not a coma. He was sitting on the bed very awake at this moment, and when he saw Xiao Yuanzheng was coming, he couldn't help but turn a little dark. He seemed to be in good spirits, and while wiping his nose, he said, it's not a big deal, just take 2 medicines, why are so many people bothered? It was the empress who asked Xiao Yuan to call, and she said, everyone has come, let Xiao Yuan take a look. The emperor could only reach out to Xiao Yuanzheng to take the pulse. Xiao Yuan was feeling the pulse, and then felt the emperor's body temperature. Although it was hot, it was not too high, so he breathed a sigh of relief. He could see at a glance that the emperor was suffering from the cold. So he said, Your Majesty has caught a cold, I will give His Majesty a prescription to try first. Xiao Yuanzheng discussed it with the 2 imperial physicians and then prescribed the prescription. He felt that it was not right to open it. Yesterday, Zhou Man did not show it to the emperor. The pulse was not serious. The cold in the body should be gone. He paused while writing the prescription, and couldn't help but ask Guzhong, "Did your Majesty eat more frozen melons yesterday? Or kick the quilt at night? Even though it's so hot during the day, it's still a little cold at night, especially since it's near the mountains, the wind blows at night, and it's still a little cold. So I still have to cover the quilt at night. Otherwise, the Emperor and the others would not have lived here to escape the summer heat." Compared with Miyagi, the Daming Palace was simply cooler. Guzhong didn't know if the Emperor kicked the quilt at night, but he knew, "Your Majesty did not drink the medicine prescribed by Lord Zhou Xiao." "Xiao Yuan Zheng." Guzhong explained in a low voice, "Your Majesty doesn't feel any discomfort. Yesterday, I didn't have a runny nose or fever. The concoction was bitter, so." Xiao Yuanzhang stopped talking, and began to pull the two colleagues to continue to prescribe the prescription. They negotiated a prescription, and then went to grab the medicine and boil it. Mr. Tang was waiting in the side room, because he was woken up in the early morning, and he was a little drowsy at the moment. He woke up immediately when he heard the movement, and asked, "How is it? Is it serious?" Guzhong said back and forth, "Xiao Yuanzheng has already prescribed the medicine, so it shouldn't matter. After all, at this moment, the Emperor has no other symptoms except fever and runny nose, no dizziness, no lack of body, and he is still thinking about having breakfast at this moment." When Lord Tang heard that the Emperor's spirit was so good, he said, "Then let someone go to the East Palace to inform His Royal Highness the Prince." Guzhong responded and sent someone out. When the Emperor was ill, the Prince of course had to come to take care of the illness. When the Prince came, he had to notify Prince Gong, who was still locked in the room to reflect. In fact, Prince Gong was closer to them and was also in the Daming Palace, but he lived in the half-built palace at the back. He is still thinking behind closed doors and copying scriptures. Originally, the Emperor moved to Daming Palace to escape the summer, but the courtiers objected to taking him. But the Emperor felt that Miyagi was too hot, and Prince Gong was fat, and it was too pitiful to leave him there alone. What if he had a heat stroke? So he had to take him. Of course, the reason was very legitimate. He had to personally watch King Gong repent, knowing that he sincerely copied the scriptures every day and admitted his mistakes. The Queen also wanted to take it, but the prince did not object. He felt that if he didn't let his parents take him there and thought about locking the third child in the Tai Chi Palace, his father would have to worry about it when he turned around, and he would definitely send ice basins and various things here. Isn't this a waste of money? It is better to take people to Daming Palace. There is a half-built palace there. Don't look at how clean it is. The things inside are definitely not as complete as Taiji Palace. It's cooler, there's no other benefit. Well, I heard that there are many mosquitoes in the Daming Palace, especially the half of the palace where the third child lives, which is close to the mountain. At night, when the mosquitoes see the lights, it looks like they see something, ha 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 ha. The Crown Prince was not at all worried that Prince Gong was closer to the Empress, because his daughter-in-law and the son in her womb were also there, and the most important thing was that the Queen was there. However, no matter how relieved, I heard that his father had a fever, so the Crown Prince hurriedly put on his clothes and got up, and rushed to Daming Palace without putting on his shoes. He asked the maid on the way, wanting to know what happened to his father. How dare the servant say this? He only said that he was not serving in the hall, but Xiao Yuanzheng and the two imperial physicians from the imperial hospital were there, as well as Lord Tang. The prince asked, did Xiao Yuanzheng not call other imperial physicians from the imperial hospital? Did Mr. Tang invite Zhao Qiagong and Mr. Wei to enter the palace? The servant whispered, the servant didn't hear about it. That is not called. The prince was relieved, it seemed that his father was fine. The crown prince didn't want the emperor to be in trouble right now. He didn't have a son yet, so he had to wait for the crown princess to give birth to a child safely. Moreover, when the knife hanging over his head was removed, the prince became filial and began to worry about his father. The prince arrived at the Daming Palace a little worried, but when he arrived at the main hall, he saw that the emperor and the queen were sitting and having breakfast together. The emperor had finished eating a bowl of noodles, and was eating buns at this time. Seeing that the prince's hair was messed up, he pointed at a servant, "I need to clean up for the prince, what's the matter with the hair disheveled?" The prince glanced at his father's face, and felt that he was even more rosy than him, and could not see any problem at all, so he turned around and cleaned up. A family of 3, no, plus King Gong, Mingda, and Chang Yu who came later, a family of 6 had breakfast together. Then King Gong had to go back and think about it behind closed doors, while the emperor took the crown prince to handle government affairs. Although he was ill, he didn't seem to be very serious. The emperor felt a little dizzy, and he felt a little discomfort in his throat and a little more snot. Therefore, it is not good to be absent from work, so I can only continue to go to court. However, the news of the emperor's ill health has already spread, and the ministers who should know it. Today is still a day of double monthly passes, ask for a monthly pass. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1545. Perhaps considering the emperor's physical condition, the political affairs discussed today were fairly peaceful, and even Wei Ji rarely smiled at the emperor. When the emperor saw this, he had to let the crown prince do most of the work for him, while he quietly took a look at the parrot kept under the porch, and taught it to say something for half an hour before leaving contentedly. He didn't hide from Wei Ji when he did this. Wei Ji knew that he would endure it silently in the future. The emperor was quite happy, and then he became extremely happy and sad. At noon, the emperor felt his throat hurt even more. After eating a piece of meat, he found it difficult to swallow, and his head became groggy. The queen didn't look right. She quickly reached out and touched his forehead, and found that it was even hotter than in the morning, and hurriedly asked someone to invite Xiao Yuanzheng. Xiao Yuanzheng didn't expect that His Majesty's condition would worsen after taking the medicine, so he hurriedly prescribed medicine to cool him down. The emperor could no longer handle government affairs in the afternoon. The prince came over and walked around. Seeing his father sleeping with frowning, he could only silently go back to the front hall to work for him. Man Bao didn't know all of this, even though the ministers were well informed. It was because the people in the palace wanted them to know the news, and they knew it so quickly. And the queen didn't want Mingda and Chang Jiao to worry, so she didn't let the palace people tell them about the emperor's fever again. When they separated in the morning, the queen didn't let them go to the main hall. She said, "Mingda is already weak, Chang Jiao is not too old, don't get sick, you can study with your husband for the past 2 days, and your sister-in-law. Be a companion, and please come over when your father recovers from his illness." Because the emperor was in good spirits when eating breakfast in the morning, and he joked with them, so the 2 of them didn't think it was a serious illness, so they turned their heads and forgot about it, and they all remembered to make ointments. The identity of the princess is even more difficult to mention. So when the main hall was worried about boiling the medicine, the side hall was happily boiling the ointment. Man Bao added honey and suet to 2 ointments, and then iced it. They took out the ointment and uncovered it. Man Bao picked a little bit and rubbed it on the back of his hand. He happily said to the 3 of them, "I think you did the right thing. You can try adding some scented flower juice to it, maybe there will be a floral scent." Mingda said, "This is good, don't you like the flowers and plants in the garden? I dig it and think the smell of grass is also good. Maybe you can add grass juice." Chang Yu thought for a moment, then shivered immediately and refused, "Isn't that green? Can I still see the face after wiping it off? I don't want it." The princess also refused. Because of the queen's advice, this time they made more rouge, which is equivalent to the last 2. Man Bao looked at it and said, I want to dig 3 more cans. Mingda and Chang Yu also took some from their mother and rubbed them on their faces in the past 2 days. They also felt that they had become better looking, so they said, I want a share too. Man Bao took out 6 small wooden jars from his medicine box, while Mingda and the others took out their own porcelain jars and placed them next to Man Bao's wooden jar, waiting for her to dig. Man Bao dug them up first, filled the porcelain jar, and said, use less, be careful of getting pimples. Mingda and Chang Yu happily responded and said, next time, we'll have to boil it. They thought it was fun to do it. The palace maids on the side thought with fireworks on their bodies, isn't it funny? The princesses just pounded the herbs and added a little firewood. Most of the time, they did the work, and they watched the stove. Man Bao also found it very interesting. The main thing is that the ointment made this time is not like the ointment made by the shopkeeper Zheng Die. She also needs to keep an eye on her. She only needs to do some key steps, and it is not very time consuming. The crown princess didn't know that the ointment could be produced at this time, so she was inexperienced. At the moment, someone was going back to get the porcelain jar. When she turned around, she saw Man Bao was digging the ointment into her wooden jar. She couldn't help but ask, why do you want so much? Man Bao said, this is for my 2nd and 3rd sisters-in-law, this is for my 6th brother, this is for grandmother Lu and Aunt Zheng, and I plan to wipe it myself. The crown princess finally knew why she was so free to teach Mingda and Chang Yu to boil the ointment. The palace maid quickly brought the porcelain jar, and the crown princess handed the porcelain jar to Man Bao. Man Bao dug out a rouge for her, and instantly only about 1/5 of it was left in the big jar. Man Bao felt that this jar was too empty, so after thinking about it, he asked Mingda, is there a bigger and better looking porcelain jar? Mingda asked the palace maid to look for it, and he found it soon. Man Bao scraped all the ointment in with a wooden stick, then covered it and handed it to Mingda, smiling, help me transfer it to the empress. After all, the rouge making this time was entrusted by the empress, right? Mingda happily took it, then looked at the other can with 2/3 of the acne cream and asked, what about this one? Man Bao asked curiously, don't you want this ointment? Chang Yu said, we don't have sores on our faces. Actually, it doesn't have to be used for acne. It has the same moisturizing effect as rouge, but rouge can also whiten, and acne cream is to eliminate acne marks and astringe. Neither Mingda nor Chang Yu were very interested. Man Bao was slightly disappointed. She has worked hard to improve this prescription, so why doesn't everyone like it? Seeing the frustration on Man Bao's face, Mingda whispered, would you like to keep a jar for me? Man Bao immediately became happy and nodded again and again, okay, okay. So I dug a big lump for Mingda. No one wanted the rest of the ointment. The ointment was made by himself, so Man Bao thought about it, and simply hugged the whole jar, then I'll take it all. The medicinal materials used here are also very valuable. She took them back and sealed them up and put them in the cellar, and slowly let her 6th brother use them. I don't know if there are still sores on her 6th brother's face. I hope they don't grow. Saturday Lang didn't know that his sister was thinking about the pimples on his face, and at this time, he was standing in the warehouse with Friday Lang to watch Lumi, who was brought back. He rubbed the rice in his hand and said, not bad. In this way, our family doesn't have to buy rice at all, and we can even supply rice for restaurants. That's right, Wu Wulang's eyes lit up, I thought it was too little when I saw the money yesterday. Man Bao could get 5 taels of silver in Ji Shi Tang, and 6,000 taels in copper, but she also served as the official is only 6,000 yuan, and I only knew when I saw the rice that the imperial court sent a lot of rice. Saturday Lang was also very happy. In this way, their restaurant almost didn't need to buy rice, and there was even leftovers. He planned, if there is any extra rice, I will make wine lees, and that will be delicious. It's midsummer now, and it's time to eat wine lees. Friday Lang doubted, can you do it? Next update around 8 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1546. Saturday Lang, why can't you do it? Although it's not as delicious as my sister-in-law's, but I can still do it. Speaking of the lees made by my sister-in-law, Wu Lang couldn't help swallowing. The last time I ate the lees made by my sister-in-law, it was because my daughter-in-law gave birth to a child. Fairme of distillers' grains is generally not made. It is only made when the family is happy and there is a mother who is confinement. The old Zhou family made lees a lot because they had many children. He had eaten everything from the big head down to his son's lees. On Saturday, Lang also missed his sister-in-law's craftsmanship, then he shook his head and regained his senses. He waved his hand and said, let's take 2 bags of rice to the restaurant today. Wu Wulang nodded, by the way, in addition to rice this time, I also brought back 2 pieces of cloth. I've seen it, and we can all use it. The reward fabrics that Manbao brought back in the past, not to mention them, are not very useful to the Fang family. It looks good, but it's not good to work in the field. So even if Manbao gave it to them, they would hand it over to Shiro Lang to exchange money or use it for business. When they need to make clothes, they go to the cloth shop to buy fabrics by themselves. But this time, the cloth silk was the salary that was brought back, and they were all ordinary cloth silk, and they could use all of them. Wu Lang looked up and down Saturday Lang and said, although you are now engaged, you don't need to take care of yourself, but you usually dress up, at least in better clothes. Your future daughter-in-law is next to the restaurant, and you can't see your head up every day. Look down. Saturday Lang blushed slightly, and asked in a low voice, I'm very shabby. It's not shabby, but it's not too good looking. Why do you still put patches on your body? Saturday Lang looked down at the robe and said, the last time I scratched it, I only had one. I can't wear it without a patch, right? I can't throw it away, so I just scratched it. Wu Wulang thought about it too, it is really a waste to not wear it after a single opening. After thinking about it, he said, well, I'll make 2 new clothes for you, and then you will wear the one when you go out, and the old ones at home or in the restaurant. Saturday Lang felt that it was too much trouble, and he was not willing to make such a toss. Wu Wulang hated the iron and said, is this all for you to know, your daughter-in-law hasn't married yet? Saturday Lang looked at the 5th brother who had paid more attention to dressing up since the 5th sister-in-law came, and remained silent. When the 2 brothers came out of the warehouse, they had already reached a consensus. Wu Lang put on Saturday Lang's shoulder and said earnestly, you're absolutely right, when did the 5th brother cheat on you? Saturday Lang thought about it carefully, but he really didn't. Usually, the 2 of them were trapped by the 4th brother, and the 2 of them have always been brothers and sisters. So Saturday Lang accepted it even more. By the way, I heard Lejun say, where is Manbao and Tian? Friday Lang said, I have asked Mr. Zhuang and Mrs. Liu, that is not a treasure-filled field. I heard that it is managed by the Ministry of Industry, but the rent collected in October every year is full of treasures. Wu Wulang said with bright eyes, Lejun has read the note, the 2 officials of Manbao together have 1,000 acres of land, 1,000 acres of rent. Just thinking about it makes my heart beat. Master Bai's family may not have so many land in their county. On Saturday, Lang was stunned, swallowed, and said, it's so good to be an official. Wu Wulang nodded. Originally, he only thought that Manbao became a 5th-rank official because of the glory of his ancestors, and the green smoke on the graves of his uncle and aunt. But now, it is not just smoke at all. It's soaring smoke. He finally knew why so many people wanted to be an official. If he had known earlier, his family had more money when he was a child, and he would have studied hard. Also try to see if you can become an official. Even Zhou Liwei regretted not studying hard when he was a child, even though he had only been in school for a year. So to Zhou Lixiu and Zhou Legu, who have the opportunity now, Zhou Liwei and Zhou Lijun, who came back with their salaries, said to them, if you can become officials, then you won't have to worry about eating and drinking. Think about Nalyami, think about it. Thinking of that land, according to Mr. Chuang, he has 200 acres of land at the 9th rank. Zhou Lixiu was speechless and asked, where did the imperial court come from so many places? How do we know this? Zhou Lijun said, anyway, the whole world belongs to the emperor. Although there were still many questions in their little heads, Zhou Lixiu and Zhou Legu were indeed refreshed, and they were more attentive when they went to class the next day. After all, 1,000 acres of land. Even if they weren't as powerful as my sister-in-law, half of my sister-in-law would have 500 acres of land. But this kind of persistence didn't last long. They quickly returned to normal, working hard like their classmates, and occasionally couldn't help but want to be lazy. Zhou Lixiu and Zhou Legu said privately, I really want to work hard, but when I'm tired, I don't read anything, and after sitting for a long time, I don't know what to do, so I'm in a daze. Mainly in a daze without thinking about anything, just dazed. He sighed and said, why don't you just pick up the books from the bookstore and copy them? After all, I made some money and practiced calligraphy. Zhou Legu thought so too, and only now did he feel that the aunt was really powerful. It feels like my aunt and my uncle are reading books all the time, don't they bother? Zhou Lixiu sighed, yeah, aren't they annoying? The two spent 3 days proving that they were not so suitable for studying hard, while the emperor spent 3 days proving that his body was not as good as he thought. It was already the 4th day, and the emperor was still feverish intermittently. That's fine. This morning, the emperor's throat was so sore that it was difficult to swallow saliva. Then he shook it when he woke up, and his whole body leaned softly on the couch. As soon as the emperor lost his strength, the empress turned pale with fright, and Guzhong turned pale, almost unable to stand. The two supported the emperor one by one and let him lean on the bed. When the queen touched the emperor's forehead, it felt as hot as a soldering iron. She was so frightened that she immediately told Guzhong, go and get the imperial physician over. She paused and said, please come to the crown prince, and the chief officials of the 3 provinces, Lord Wei and the others. Ever since Ji Xiang's official appointment, the emperor has not chosen the left minister, and the right minister is too old, basically not going to the court, and planning to serve in the near future, so the emperor now relies most heavily on Wei Ji, Lao Tang, and Zhao Qiuagong. Guzhong rushed out immediately. The palace people immediately hit the cold water to cool down the emperor. The queen twisted the towel over the emperor's head, and the emperor fainted for a while, then slowly woke up leaning on the bed. Because of the high fever, his eyes were full of blood at this time, and he looked flushed red. He asked slowly in a hoarse voice, why is it so serious all of a sudden? The queen doesn't understand, why is it so serious all of a sudden? See you tomorrow. Ask for a monthly pass before going to bed. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1547. Xiao Yuanzheng and the others quickly gave the two of them an answer. This time, 4 imperial physicians consulted. After they examined the emperor's whole body, they told the emperor solemnly, Your Majesty's old injury has recurred. The emperor smiled and said, no wonder I feel a burning pain in the lower back. It turns out that the old injury has recurred. While Xiao Yuan was discussing the prescription with others, he whispered to the queen, Miss, why don't you ask Zhou Man to come over to discuss and see if she can use acupuncture to lower the temperature of Majesty? He said, Your Majesty is now relapsed and many medicines cannot be used. The queen nodded and looked at Aunt Chang. Aunt Chang bowed and walked out. She quickly found the palace maid and asked, "Has Lord Zhou Xiao come to Daming Palace?" "No, it's not yet time. Usually, she comes here at noon. It's only morning." Aunt Chang said, "Send someone to pick her up immediately, and tell your majesty to announce her." "Yes." When Manbayadong Palace arrived at Daming Palace, not only the Crown Prince and the Crown Prince were here, but Wei Ji and other ministers also arrived, and then they entered the inner palace and found that the Queen Mother was here. She was sitting on the edge of the bed with a tired face, wiping her tears with a handkerchief. Man Bao was brought forward by the palace maid, and the Queen Mother saw her and said, "Come up and show the Emperor. Get up and give her place." Man Bao stepped forward to give the Emperor a pulse. At this time, the Emperor was still awake, so Man Bao asked him to open his mouth and wanted to take a look at his throat. "Emperor." Xiao Yuanzheng also looked at his throat, but at this moment it was just opened again. Let Zhou Man look at it once. The Emperor comforted himself that although she was young enough to be her own daughter, her medical skills were not bad, so she should be seen by a courtier. So the Emperor opened his mouth. Man Bao held up the lamp and glanced at it, and saw that his throat was full of pus. Man Bao was a little worried. After turning off the lamp and handing it over to Guzhong, he withdrew to discuss with Xiao Yuanzheng, "Why is it so serious? Didn't you say it was getting better 2 days ago?" Imperial physician Lu on the side lowered his voice and said, "Not to mention the first 2 days, it was not so powerful yesterday, but it was a bit repeated. I never thought that it would become so powerful in one night. The throat is full of pus, your majesty, swallowing is a little difficult. The southeast wind that blew at night last night, even the Daming Palace is very hot. Your majesty is no longer suffering from the cold." Fang Tai said, "The disease was not broken before, and it was intermittent, his majesty's healing power. It's not as good as before, not to mention the old injury has recurred now." Xiao Yuan is nodding. He also thinks the same way. He doesn't know whether it is regret or distress. In order to prevent his majesty from being too uncomfortable, he used conservative treatment methods, but his majesty's health is worse than he expected. It's true that the emperor's body is not as strong as he appears, regardless of his age. After all, he is the father of so many children, but he has a lot of old wounds. Usually these old wounds are fine, at most it is a little sore and itchy when it rains or is hot, but once the old wounds recur. This time, it was obvious that the inflammation in the body caused the old injury. In addition, the fever was not a simple cold, and the condition was more complicated. Listening to their discussion, Man Bao said to Keek in his heart, "The emperor's illness has deteriorated sharply. If he can't cool down, he will die." Keek asked her, "Want to buy antiviral medicine?" After that, she found a tube of watermelon red-like potion in the encyclopedia and showed it to her, saying, "The new product from the biological laboratory in the encyclopedia only needs 100,000 points. Of course, this is not specifically for the treatment of sore throats, colds, and coughs, but for antiviruses, and the symptoms are the same." Keek said, "It may not be necessary to use the first tube, and half the tube will be effective." Man Bao looked at the color and said, "If you are colorless, I can still find a way to add it to the water the emperor drinks. How can I give him this color?" Keek also thought about it. If the host could not explain the origin of this medicine, it would be life-threatening to cause people suspicion. She has taken 2 kinds of medicines from the system. One is green, which is given to Jianxi, the other is blue, which is said to be poison from the detoxification stone. Potion, because a considerable part of the poison stone is blue. And Zhou Man said that some of the ingredients of the antidote were extracted from poison stones. Of course, this conclusion was told by Mr. Mo to Zhou Man. Although the prince and others didn't know how to extract this, it didn't prevent them from trusting her. No one knows about the former except Man Bao and Jianxi. The latter has a reason, and once again, it is still such a brightly colored potion, and Man Bao can't find an excuse for the time being. Moreover, instead of relying on the encyclopedia, she wanted to do it herself. In terms of prescriptions, Man Bao is not as good as Xiao Yuanzheng and the others. In just a short while, Xiao Yuanzheng has formulated a treatment plan. After prescribing medicine to reduce inflammation and cool down, then prescribe medicine to apply old wounds, adjust internal and external treatment, Man Bao then uses acupuncture to cool down and increase the energy of medicine. After seeing the effect, we will talk about it. After everyone received their respective tasks, they went to prepare. Imperial Dr. Lu took the negotiated prescription to prepare the medicine, Imperial Dr. Fang and Imperial Dr. Lu went to prepare the ointment for trauma, and Xiao Yuan and Man Bao were going to inject needles for His Majesty. Naturally, Man Bao dominated, and Xiao Yuan was watching. Even if his acupuncture skills were not as good as hers, his medical judgment would not be weaker than Man Bao. Moreover, the psychology of the queen and courtiers also felt that Xiao Yuan was staring at them more at ease. Gu Zhong served the emperor to undress, and Man Bao first gave him acupuncture to cool down. The emperor's head was dizzy at this time, and he asked Man Bao vaguely, "Why is this disease so serious?" Standing at the end of the bed, Xiao Yuan had a chill on his back and turned to look at Man Bao. At this time, the emperor was lying on his stomach, and he could only see Man Bao in front of him and the queen mother who was sitting on the side wiping tears, but he couldn't see anyone else. Man Bao gave him acupuncture while explaining his condition. "Your Majesty has entered the summer heat again before the cold has subsided, so the condition is repeated. You have old wounds on your body, and some of the tiger wolf medicine can't be used, so you dragged it down." Man Bao sighed and said, "There was a sudden southeasterly wind last night, and the temperature was suddenly high. It's summer, and it's easy to get Xiao Wen." Man Bao did not say a word. The emperor was unlucky. Even though his immunity is not very good, under normal circumstances, the general fever will not become what it is now, not to mention that he is still the emperor, and he has hired the best doctor and used the best medicine. Man Bao had just read the prescriptions from the past 3 days, and the medicine that Xiao Yuan was prescribing had no problems at all. Even if Man Bao came to prescribe it, he might not be able to prescribe it more comprehensively. However, if she came to treat him, she would have cured him with 3 doses of medicine. As for whether it would cause old wounds and pains, Man Bao felt that she would definitely not be concerned. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1548. But just after listening to Xiao Yuanzheng and their dialectics, and reading their prescription, she knew her inadequacies. However, it was also because of the sudden change in the weather that Xiao Wen's good prescription became inappropriate, and the not-so-good prescription in her heart might be right. That's why Zhou Manke felt that the emperor was unlucky. It was also fate, and the doctor couldn't cure it. Of course, these inner causes are full of treasures, and Xiao Yuan is aware of it, and other imperial doctors in the imperial hospital also saw it, but no one said it. The patients, especially the noble sick name of the emperor, would not understand this. They would only feel that their disease was not cured, and they would die anyway. These internal causes are full of treasures and cannot be told to the emperor, so I can only imply to him that there is nothing wrong with the medicine prescribed by the imperial doctor, and no one wants to harm you, but you are unlucky. Last night, the southeast wind happened, and the temperature went up again. High, under the alternation of cold and heat, the cold and heat of the internal force did not disappear, and the condition became serious. When the emperor heard this, he couldn't help but feel even more depressed. Man Bao, however, was still unaware, and stabbed him with a knife. "You shouldn't have taken the medicine I gave you that day. The weather was so good that day, the north wind was blowing, and it was cold at night. You took the medicine. Cover the quilt and sleep for a while and the cold in the body will disappear. Even if you are uncomfortable with the heat later, at most you will have some prickly heat on your body, and 2 blisters on your mouth will be finished. Man Bao finished the needle while nagging. The Queen Mother on the side realized that there was a reason for this. She couldn't help but get angry and reached out to pat him. When she raised her hand, she found that he had needles all over his body, so she restrained herself, but she still couldn't help but said angrily, "You are all like this. Big, my grandson can run all over the place, why do you still not obey the doctor's orders? The imperial doctor has prescribed medicine for you, but you don't even take it." The emperor's already dizzy head became even more dizzy. He really regretted it in his heart, but who can get the Queen Mother or Zhou Man away now? Because the emperor was lying on his stomach, Man Bao couldn't quite see his expression, and he nodded after hearing the Queen Mother teach the emperor a lesson. When the Queen Mother saw him, she trained even more vigorously. Seeing him lying on the bed without speaking, she could just see his son's haggard face, and when she touched his hot forehead, the Queen Mother couldn't help crying again. She wiped her tears and said, "Cat slave, I only have your son now, do you want me to send the black-haired man to the white-haired man?" When the emperor heard this, he couldn't help but feel sad. He couldn't move his hand, so he could only comfort her in a hoarse voice, "Mother is relieved, my son will be fine." Man Bao, who was on the side, saw a needle in the needle, "You must take your medicine on time." "Emperor." The Queen Mother stared at him. The emperor could only answer. The Queen finally came to rescue him, and she stepped forward to help the Queen Mother to comfort him and said, "Mother, don't give up on you, and let the concubine take care of your majesty." The Queen Mother glanced at the needle pierced on the emperor's body, then at Zhou Man, wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes, and said, "Zhou Man, Xiao Yuanzhang, if you take good care of yourselves, your majesty will naturally benefit from you, but if something happens to your majesty, Ijia will be rude." Xiao Yuanzhang responded with sincerity and fear, and Man Bao bowed in response, feeling that a big mountain slammed into her back. At this moment, she finally felt the badness of being an official, alas. Sure enough, no matter how much benefit you take, you have to take so much risk. There is no deception in the book, and there will never be a pie in the sky. No wonder the emperor gave her 1,000 acres of farmland. Man Bao got a cooling needle, and the emperor felt a little better, but the fever was still very high. Man Bao pulled the needle, and Imperial Physician Lu just delivered the medicine. The emperor drank it, and Man Bao gave him another set of acupuncture, so that the effect of the medicine could work faster. The cooling effect of the prescription discussed by everyone is not bad. The main reason is that the emperor has burned too much now, and Xiao Yuanzhang can no longer take care of the old injury, otherwise it may really burn people to death. This dose is considered a powerful medicine. After taking it, the emperor frowned in discomfort, and his breathing was a little short. Xiao Yuanzhang couldn't help looking at Man Bao and whispered, "Do your third set of needles." This is also what everyone discussed at the beginning. This prescription is bad here, but life and stability are mentioned, and Tai Hospital quietly chose life. Man Bao silently pulled out a few needles and changed the needle method. The emperor fell into a drowsy sleep, but the temperature did drop. Seeing that he was sweating all the time, the queen knew that it was cooling down, and wiped his sweat with a dry towel while testing the temperature on his forehead. When the time was up, Man Bao pulled out the needle. She felt the emperor's pulse, and after a while, she got up and silently retreated to the side, frowning tightly at a young age. Xiao Yuanzhang stepped forward to feel the emperor's pulse, and let Imperial Physician Lu also look at it and said, "Miss, your Majesty's fever has subsided temporarily." The queen breathed a sigh of relief and waved her hand, "You have worked hard for a few imperial doctors, you should go to rest first." Several people responded, bowed, and stepped back. Xiao Yuanzhang had something to discuss with Man Bao, so he brought her along. The 4 imperial physicians are all refined, no matter what the actual situation is, anyway, their faces are as serious as usual, and ordinary people really can't see anything. Therefore, Wei Ji, Lord Tang, and others who were sitting in the outer room waiting for news, all stared at Man Bao. Seeing that her brows were frowning and her little face was bitter, they knew that the situation was not good. The prince also chased after him from the room, and asked Xiao Yuanzheng directly, "When will the emperor be better?" "How can Xiao Yuanzheng be sure?" "Can only say, Your Highness, we have to discuss the medication. Although your Majesty has temporarily subsided the fever, the disease has not been cured, and it may recur." The prince frowned and looked at Zhou Man. But seeing that she was frowning and looking at her toes, he knew that the situation was not very good. He pursed his lips and let the imperial physicians discuss it. Xiao Yuanzheng and imperial physician Lu did not discuss in front of everyone, but pulled everyone from the imperial hospital to the place where the medicine was boiled in the ear room, and after taking away the palace staff, they discussed in a low voice, "What else do you have in your hands? Is it the right formula?" Hearing Xiao Yuanzhen's words, Tai Fang and Tai Lu, who didn't feel the pulse, knew that the situation was not good, and couldn't help but ask, "How is the pulse? Is the medicine not working?" Xiao Yuanzheng glanced at imperial physician Lu and sighed, "When I checked the pulse, I also glanced at the old wound on your Majesty's waist. It was already red and swollen, and it was even hidden and water-stained." Dr. Fang and Dr. Lu turned pale when they heard it, and quickly looked at Dr. Lu. Imperial physician Lu nodded slightly and said solemnly, "Your Majesty's old injury was not handled very well in the early years, and this left a hidden danger." After speaking, he glanced at Zhou Man again, and said, "If the Zheng family's Sancai ointment for hemostasis and anti-inflammatory had come out 20 years earlier, this injury might have been dealt with." Xiao Yuanzheng said irritably, "Is this the time to talk about this? The inflammation in your Majesty's body is too serious, especially the inflammation in the throat, which has already developed pus, and it will not be cured." Next update around 4 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1549. Xiao Yuanzheng paused for a while. If he didn't think of a solution, he would definitely have a fever again. No, the next fever would be inevitable. All they could think about was to find a way to cool down and then reduce the inflammation. You all think about it. Do you still have any prescriptions in hand? Let's discuss and come up with a prescription. Man Bayadao, the inflammation in your Majesty's body is too serious, and now the old injury has recurred, and the medicines that have been taken are too late to relieve the inflammation in the throat. I think the weather is still very hot today, and the ice basin cannot be used in the house. I'm afraid it will get worse tonight. Imperial physician Fang reached out and wiped the sweat on his forehead. He took a look out. It was not even noon, and the weather was already too hot. The weather this year is indeed very strange. He hesitated for a moment, and asked in a low voice, 2 more medicines? No, before Man Bao could object, Xiao Yuanzheng had already vetoed his veto with a sullen face, and said in a low voice, Your Majesty's foundation was broken in the early years of war, and it was fine when he was not sick or injured. Something's going to happen. Man Bao nodded again and whispered, Today's dose of medicine is a little heavy, and His Majesty's breathing is a lot heavier. Prescribing a heavy dose of medicine is a temporary improvement, but it will also destroy the foundation. In the Emperor's situation at this time, if the amount of medicine is added, it will not only damage the foundation. Accidents are likely to occur. Then what should we do? Heavy medicine cannot be used, and the inflammation in the body is raging. I am afraid that it cannot be balanced with a steady prescription, Fang Tai whispered. With your Majesty's current situation, I am afraid that it will burn at night. Xiao Yuanzheng shook his head heavily and said, I'm afraid it won't be at night. The four of them fell silent. Man Bao subconsciously glanced at Keek in her mind. Keek found out the tube of red potion with a deep understanding, and it flashed and flashed in her mind. Man Bao secretly said, "The Emperor is different from others. If she can't find a way at night, she should find a way to pour this medicine into the Emperor's mouth. But before that, she had to ask Teacher Mo. In this world, even Xiao Yuanzheng has no choice, so he can only ask Teacher Mo." Seeing that everyone couldn't discuss anything, Man Bao turned around and said, "Why don't you all go away and think of a way? Let's discuss together after thinking about it." Xiao Yuanzheng didn't have a good idea, so he nodded, but before leaving, he still united everyone in a low voice. "Now is the time to share will and woe. I hope everyone will cooperate sincerely and save His Majesty no matter what." The four of them responded in unison, and Tai Lu said, "The hospital is rest assured about the matter of Lu Zongjun, the king of food. No one dares to neglect the matter of your Majesty." Xiao Yuan nodded and nodded to Tai Lu and said, "Tai Lu will guard your Majesty with me first," and then changed to Tai Lu and Tai Fang. He looked at Man Bao and said in a low voice, "Dr. Zhou, your acupuncture is the best. You need to come to your Majesty for cooling down or taking medicine. Please rest in the side hall, we want to ask you to be more convenient." This was the first time Xiao Yuanzheng called the imperial doctor Man Bao, and Man Bao hurriedly responded. Man Bao and Lu Tai, Fang Tai, moved to the side hall together, where tables, chairs, pen, ink, paper and inkstone were placed. The three stood at the table and thought for a while. Imperial Dr. Lu said, "I have to go back to the Imperial Hospital to find some manuals." Fang Tai said, "I will walk with you." The two of them looked at Man Bao. Man Bao had just sent a message to Teacher Mo, and only hoped that he would see the reply quickly. When he recovered, he saw that the two were staring at her, and asked suspiciously, "What's wrong?" Seeing that Man Bao was thinking, Imperial Physician Lu didn't mind. He nodded at her and said, "Tian Physician Zhou wants to help Xiao Yuanzheng and stay here. I'll take my leave first." Man Bao nodded, sent them to the door, and then went back to the table and sat down. Eunuch Wu didn't know where to sneak in quietly. There were no palace servants in the side hall. At this moment, everyone's mind was in the main hall, and they were busy in the main hall. He conjured up a plate of snacks for Man Bao, and whispered, "Dr. Zhou, should I have something to eat first? Everyone is busy at the moment, I'm afraid they won't be able to take care of your lunch." Man Bao thanked him and asked, "Have you eaten?" Eunuch Wu smiled and said, "Don't worry, Dr. Zhou, I will never be hungry." Man Bao squeezed a piece of dessert, and Eunuch Wu couldn't help but lowered his voice and asked, "Dr. Zhou, your Majesty's illness?" Man Bao frowned at him. Eunuch Wu immediately said, "I didn't mean to inquire, it's just that I just came over from the back of the ear room, but I saw a palace maid standing by the back window, because the tree was blocking it and I couldn't see my face. She ran away." Man Bao opened his mouth wide. Eunuch Wu lowered his voice and said, "If Dr. Zhou doesn't believe it, you can ask Princess Mingda." At that time, Aunt Chang, who was beside the Empress, was about to send Princess Mingda back to the side hall to rest, and saw it with our family. Man Bao broke into a cold sweat thinking of what they had just said in the ear room. Seeing her pale face, Eunuch Wu lowered his voice and asked, "Dr. Zhou, your Majesty's illness?" Man Bao gave Eunuch Wu a deep look, and after a while, he said softly, "Although it is dangerous, it should be safe." Eunuch Wu loosened his face, showed a smile, and immediately put it away. He said meaningfully to Man Bao, "This is also the expectation of His Royal Highness. After all, the Crown Princess is about to give birth, why should His Majesty see His Highness? The eldest son is born." Man Bao nodded slowly, only to feel that the palace was really a pit, and he didn't know who was standing behind the ear room and staring at them. However, no matter who it is, this is not something that Man Bao can manage. The most important thing now is to get His Majesty's fever down completely. Man Bao put down the dim sum in his hand, got up and said, Eunuch Wu, I want to go back to the East Palace to get some things, but I can't leave now. Why don't I write a letter, you bring it to Bai Shan of Chongguan Pavilion for me, let him. Are you ready to bring me? Eunuch Wu said in a low voice, Young Master Bai can't come here without an edict, but our family can let the apprentice go there in person. Young Master Bai has collected the things and handed them over to him, and he will bring it to you. Man Bao nodded, then he studied the ink and picked up a pen to write a text message to Eunuch Wu. Eunuch Wu tucked it into his sleeve, and seeing that no one was paying attention, he sneaked out again. He is the prince's person. If people find out that he is in contact with the imperial doctor at this time, even if he really did nothing, outsiders will not believe it, let alone what he really did. It is taboo to inquire about His Majesty's condition at this time. Even the always upright Wei Ji didn't dare to inquire about the emperor's condition at this time, but anxiously waited with Zhao Qiuagong and others in the outer hall. Man Bao and others left, then sat on the chair, leaned back, and simply closed his eyes and sank his consciousness into the system. Keek, help me stare outside. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1550. Coco responds. Man Bao glanced at his mailbox, but Mr. Mo was still not online, so he could only go to the medical books to find the catalogue of inflammation and high fever. Turning over, she felt that something was wrong, and asked Keek, did you not know that someone overheard us when we were in the ear room just now? Keek's electronic voice said indifferently, Host, I have not detected her maliciousness towards the host, so the system judges that it will not cause life danger to you and is not within the scope of the warning. Man Bao was stunned for a moment, thinking about it, is this the main system staring at them again? To put it bluntly, the system will not interfere with the host's life in the original world, so how they can live depends on themselves. Of course, if they have points, they can pay for the services of the system. The system's chip has its own identified programs, and only those identified as posing a danger to the life safety of the host will automatically warn. Keek's warning bottom line has always been very low, so low that when a spider climbed over the wall above Manbao's head, it would give a warning. It is because it concludes that the spider's toxin may cause damage to the host, and the host is too young, and it is very likely that the damage will become fatal. Therefore, now that Man Bao has grown up, the bottom line of his warning has always been very low, and because the age of its host was too young, this bottom line was also reviewed by the main system. But now this bottom line has been retained, and even there is a faint trend of continuing to decrease. Under normal circumstances, the main system will not detect it. After all, Keek is just a small stone in the vast universe. It is impossible to sift a small system back and forth. Checked. Suyu peeped at her before, even if there was not much malice in her, Keek still warned her. At this moment, it suddenly became official, obviously because it had to be done according to the procedure. Man Bao was silent and did not speak. When he was thinking about it, there was a ding-dong in the system. Mr. Mo's avatar lit up, Man Bao's eyes lit up, and then he clicked on the video communication. After a while, Mr. Mo appeared in Man Bao's mind. However, Man Bao can see Mr. Mo through Keek, but Mr. Mo can't see Man Bao's brain waves. Humans in the future don't have this function yet. Keek made a timely ding-dong and launched the package. If you want barrier-free communication, can you communicate with people in the contact list even if you are just immersed in the system? The encyclopedia has specially set up a preferential package for you. As long as 18,998 points can be embodied through consciousness, so that the person opposite you can see you. Coco paused for a while and read out a line in small print, the time limit is 10 hours. Man Bao was stunned and asked in a voiceless voice, this is too little. It's only 10 hours, which is more expensive than stalking the prince. And teacher Mo was already frowning in the classroom. Where's the person? Man Bao was helpless. This is the imperial palace, this is the Daming palace, this is still the side hall next to the main hall where the emperor lives. The palace maids and the servants walked around, and someone came in at some point. Even if Keek helped to stare, she couldn't safely disappear in this public place and enter the system. After thinking about it, she still reluctantly bought this function to visualize consciousness. After buying it, she felt that it was wrong. I can communicate with teacher Mo by voice and email. Keek said indifferently, does the host still have time? Man Bao thought about it too. After all, email communication is not as good as face-to-face communication. Now they are fighting for their lives against time. In Man Bao's mind, she saw many light spots appearing out of thin air in the system, and these light spots slowly converged into her, but she was a phantom. Man Bao looked very novel. He couldn't help but whimper in his mind, and the phantom also snorted, and then looked down at his hands, feet, and body. When Man Bao thought about it, the phantom jumped up curiously. It's all her thoughts. Keek said, this is your consciousness, except that you have no flesh and blood, it is you, so you can do whatever you want. As soon as Man Bao's mind moved, the virtual shadow entered the teaching room. Teacher Mo finally saw Man Bao, and when she saw that she was a ghost, she smiled and said, you are quite rich, this function has just come out, and not many people have used it. I didn't expect the encyclopedia to recommend it to you guys in different time and space. People. The main reason is that they don't need much. Unlike Man Bao and the others, when they communicate, they do not enter the system, but directly project the hologram. When their consciousness enters, they enter. Therefore, it is very tasteless to have a small function to visualize consciousness. However, recently, the National Communications Company is making a lot of publicity, among which it has cooperation with the encyclopedia. Man Bao asked, does this cost too expensive in your opinion? Yeah, it's not cheap, everyone thinks it's useless for a monthly subscription of 120 points. Man Bao was severely hit. How much? 120 points per month, what's wrong? Man Bao was so heartbroken that he couldn't speak, and asked Keek, why are you cheating on me? Keek said indifferently, host, is there a technology tax? After Keek's voice fell, Mr. Mo has already said, but it is easier for you to earn points than us. After all, you are the host of the recording system. This technology is only used for yourself, and it is a service class, and there will be no technology tax. Points are still affordable, you can't use many functions of the system, and we can contact you after you pay for a month. Man Bao, it's too expensive to cover. There are nearly 20,000 points in 10 hours. How many points are in 360 hours in a month? Keek is not embarrassed when the lie set in the system is exposed, anyway, it just follows the setting, and the host must come to such a judgment. The host is not too young, it is time to learn to grow up. What can Man Bao do? Of course, she chose to forgive Keek, because she forgot for a while that Keek was the one under surveillance. Mr. Mo pulled back to the main point and asked with a smile, I received your email, what, encountered a problem? Man Bao immediately explained the emperor's condition in detail. Xiao Yuanzheng had prescribed the medicine before, because he was concerned about His Majesty's condition, so the prescription was stable, and he wanted to take it slowly. Although his illness was repeated a bit, he would take it again. In the past few days, the medicine has been slowly broken, but last night the wind changed suddenly, and the weather became very hot, and in just one night, his throat developed pus. Teacher Mo automatically regarded Xiao Yuanzheng as a doctor and His Majesty as a patient. When he taught Man Bao, he occasionally took a break in the middle, and she often told her about people and things in her world. He knew that His Majesty was the emperor of the ancient times, he had absolute power over life and death, and he could not talk about human rights at all. Therefore, he is also very worried about the safety of Man Bao's life. He thought for a moment and said, "This is acute tonsil inflammation, which is likely to cause high fever, otitis media. See you at 8 p.m.